Greetings, everybody. Here we are. The process is reaching its final phase, the home stretch. I am, of course, exceedingly honored and feel immensely privileged to be here with you, but also to be with my good friend Alioune Sall. I want to remind everybody that this session will be held in French. So those of you who require translation, interpretation, you will need your headphones, okay? Aha, I see everybody grabbing their headphones. That's a good sign. So this is a francophone session, although I will pose the questions, and in the interests of time, I will pose the questions in English, and then Dr. Alioune will respond in French. We're not going to do introductions. I think we're probably familiar to most of you, and of course these days easily accessible on the internet. So to kick things off, I just want to start with asking Alioune a little bit about the past. A bit of background about what he thought was at stake when he started his practice. Why was it important? Because I think all of us had relatively strange paths into futures, and our thinking about futures wasn't, something that was announced as a career path. You have a PhD in sociology, mine is in economics. We didn't quite expect to be working on the future. And furthermore, when both of us started, we were really at a time when the Cold War was still hot. And there was a sense that on the one hand you had the United States and Europe, but you had imperialism and colonialism. On the other hand, there was still the vestiges of the hope that was the Soviet Union and the idea of a more egalitarian society. And so the conditions in which we started our work about the future in the context of the Cold War and the competition of those different systems was quite different than today. And I think it was, to just be a little bit humorous about it, and it's something that always strikes me as sort of funny, Che Guevara was not a T-shirt. So today we see it that way. But just to give us a little bit of the sense of how you started your career.
Thank you very much, Riel. And before replying to this question, I would like to express my pleasure to be here with you in this Dubai forum. And I had the pleasure as well to meet again old friends and to create new acquaintances. Riel is 100% right when he was saying that we lived in a different world. I started my interest in Foresight in 1976. 50 years next year of me kicking my career in this field. And when I worked on these questions and issues, I was at an institute that was a UN institute under the supervision of Professor Samir Amin, an economist from Egypt, Franco-Egyptian, and he was very renowned for his work on the deconnection and all the problems of alternative development. Mr. Amin employed me at this institute where I started with a project, Africa and Future Problematics. This was my project. And then we had a bipolar world. From one side, the Varsovia or the Warsaw Bloc, under the direction of these entities, and from the other side, NATO, the military branch of the Western countries under the direction of the US. And the developments, regardless the differences between these two blocks, differences that were ideological or political or even economic, but there was a common ground. I mean, the necessity to assist development in the best way to prevent the African countries recently independent to be with the other bloc. So this was a simplistic vision. This vision encompassed Africa with raw materials in abundance, raw materials that were not available at the industrialized economies, and as well the big market in Africa. And then the necessity to develop relied in the following: transferring capitals, because this was absent, and the transfer of technology. And there was an alchemy under a process to produce what we call development. But what a simplistic vision. And with anything simple, it did not materialize. But in 1975, 76, when Africa started on this program or this project, this simplistic view to development was challenged by economists, among them Samir Amin. This theory reflected or showed the dominance of a world that in essence was Western. When I speak about the West, I mean the US and as well Europe. And the predominance was for an approach that was very far from realistic to development, because all the interests were not measured except by economic growth. So then, back then, there was a dissatisfaction given the weakness of this theory, and a dissatisfaction before the polarity of the world, rendering Africa just a parameter to adjust. Speaking about the socialists or the capitalists, Africa was just a variable parameter to adapt. And during 100 years, this was the vision to development. And then the refusal to this simplistic problematic led us to think about what might have been another Africa and another world. Why? Because this was not acceptable at all for Africa to stay poor despite its richness. So the development was reduced to what can be quantified by economic growth and not by population well-being. And in this context, personally, I started with foresight. And I can say that first of all, there was indignation. And from this indignation, we started exploring the futures because the present was not acceptable. And I think that anyone that is thinking of foresight is doing so because the present is not entirely fulfilling. So the indignation, this refusal of the fatality, and as well, this was the first catalyst to any prospective thinking or mentality. And at the service of Africa and this project to Africa with foresight, we as well tackled other development aspects with Samir Amin, who was insisting on us to examine the social development, equality, and as well the political dimension of development. I mean the main players at the geopolitical stage, and what were the strategies of these players in order to keep Africa reduced to a factory of raw materials to the international market dominated by the West. So he encouraged us to be interested to the environmental aspect as well. we are speaking about 1975-76, but Samir was convinced that the majority of the Africans was under the exploitation of the biomass, and amid this we couldn't but think of the environment. More than 1968, and between 68 and 1973 there was a period of drought. And back then, this was an important point to think of because there will be no development with no values. There will be no development without an ethos, without a vision inspired by the cosmology and the cosmogonies. The development should have been taken into consideration with the technological aspect, but the fourth in the industrial revolution hadn't started yet. We were barely at the third, with the consumption and the impact of this consumption on economies and on societies. And with this evolution, with this development, the future of the continent would have been traced. So this is a holistic approach that was recommended, and this is what we worked on. We started with this indignation, and thus my interest in foresight. And from the start, it was clear to me that this prospective approach should be holistic and not sectorial. Thank you very much. But I have a question, because now we will jump from 40, 50 years ago and the Cold War to another topic, today. So I have to recognize that I was in indignation as well to that idea, saying that the future will only be industrialized. And we are looking to the big players today that are requesting this industrial revenge with the domination and supremacy in production lines, as well with the proletariat being working for them, and that the vision of the world is simply trying to keep up with these inequalities of the past. And today we are witnessing a situation where we are seeing an inhibition to these systems, like, for example, the oligarchs saying that there is no other alternative. And today we need more moderation, for example, because what is the alternative? But today there is an abuse of power, and we see a world that is consuming more and more oil, producing more and more consumables, and we have a little variety to our model of development. And in some cases, what about equality? Because we know that if we keep inequalities, of course, maybe the Chinese are keeping up with the trends to go beyond poverty, but there is a destructive impact on our societies today. Personally, I have been working in this field for 40 years, but we are stuck in these models that were starting to be criticized 50 years ago. Of course, Riel, you are speaking about keeping up, about compensating, and this was the model of the first years of independence, and this model still has some ill impacts, because today there is a return to the ideologies of before the independence, with this idea that there will be an African emergence today to keep up with the Asian countries, for example, and to get inspiration from Asian models to make Africa a continent that is just to be motivated to participate at the market, the international market, and as well without questioning this productivist model. So, of course, we should be aware today of this, because this model will not lead but to an acceleration of disparities, and then the or rendering the social tissue more fragile. So we speak about economic growth of 10 countries, and we were speaking about 6 countries out of them. But I said, pay attention about Namibia, for example, and South Africa replacing Brazil, for example, today this is not to be rejoiced or to be celebrated. So this is why I think that the fight for alternatives and this quest for a development that would be more just and more sustainable, this is our fight today. And luckily, the concept of development changed thanks to the works of big names in the field, saying that the development first is a freedom, more freedom given to communities and to individuals to be able to choose how they manage their lives. And I think that this is the idea today. And luckily as well, because in the geoeconomics and the geopolitics today, we are witnessing changes that can be for someone a source of progress. Commenting on this point and for the sake of time, today we are all here to conceive the future, to think the future today. And I think that it is really disappointing, but as well positively shocking, because 10 years ago we were speaking about the return to a colonialistic model in order to continue with the ideas today with this solutionism of problems without questioning these problems that we are to be resolved. And these problems haven't been resolved for the 50 years, and these problems are just enshrining the powers of the past. Today there is a big challenge to break these hypotheses and to be more practical, because we are practitioners at the end of the day. So what's your opinion on this point, or maybe some tips, some advice to give in order to change this model and to go beyond our obsolete models? I think that a few years ago we had used this expression, quite frankly, to decolonize the future, because Africa was and is still trying to be decolonized, and as well thanks to the 10 books by UNESCO. So we know better our past today, but what we are not aware of that there are identity, economy, and policy labels that are still today reminiscent of colonization. So for to decolonize the future, today we have to remember these ideas. And at the colloquium of Montreal in 1979, this expression was coined. Decolonize the future means three things. First of all, or cutting this cycle from the conceptual aspect of things and the organization of this comprehension of a dynamic that is structuring the world. What is the state? What is the nation? What are the social groups, etc.? And what is the meaning of this concept that through which we look at the world, as significance, as meaning, as direction as well, because we have to break these concepts. We have to break as well the message that we are trying to relay. Why? Because why do we want a future world, a world in the future? Why? And I think that here as well we need answers. We need to say very clearly what are our theories for this prospect. First of all, the future is open, more open today than any past time, but as well with all the concepts that are more numerous today. Second, the future is a domain of power. Not being interested to the future will lead to be the victims of the urgency or emergency dictatorship, and these decisions will not be well informed. Third, there is no right way to the person who does not have a map on the way. So it is important for us to know as human beings, as a human communities, what is linking us, what is our common ground, what can we achieve together. So this shared vision is crucial. So we have to be very clear, and then we have to accept the fact that the future is built with time. It is not an overnight process with very short victories. We cannot just dictate some concepts and impose them. This needs patience with communities that are different, yes, but linked by the humanity. I share many of your ideas and points of view, and at the same time, I'm a little bit concerned about an important point, this contradiction between the first, the second, and the third principle. So today, I see a seductive power of the totalitarian imagination. This imagination leads us to a sort of security, saying this is the powerful. Now our shared vision will improve the society. The society would reassure me. So the openness to these possibilities is reduced, and this will be sacrificed as well at the service of this common vision. And this was a concern to me, this new ideology that would erase the opportunities of this world where everyone is emerging and where we have many as well differences. So this is a trap today, and the question becomes how to reach a method to go beyond these compromises that were very destructive. I think that we will be in a trap if we reduce security to military affairs. And when we speak about security, we have to have a larger comprehension. Peace does not mean no wars. Peace means a participation to the construction of a world where there are human beings that constitute the center of everything. These human beings are in rapport, in relationship among them, but as well with relationship to the nature. This feeds into development. And it is clear that in this context, diversity is not an obstacle. No, it is the foundation of the possibility of collaboration. So when we say diversity, we mean different cosmologies. We mean as well some approaches and some imaginary concepts that might be different, because the biggest weakness of our world is that the international community, the so-called international community, was founded twice on the idea of nations, the nations meeting under an organization roof. The nations are similar, and all the nations are seeking power. And I think that the challenge is to build organizations revolving around communities, because communities are well aware and recognize this diversity and make this diversity as their foundation. So we need not a League of Nations, but a League of Communities, and we will change, of course, these concepts. More languages will be spoken, and I think that as in May 1968, we have to put imagination in power.